Hello, my friends. Okay, let's move on. We're on to section 3 here. And so how do humans mess with extinction rates a little bit? Let's pay attention to that. And so these are the greatest ways that humans mess or create problems in extinction in the long run. Just remember this acronym, HIPCO. I guess an initialism more than an acronym. HIPCO is a good indication of how we cause premature extinction as human beings. So the H stands for habitat destruction. It is the number one thing we do to mess with species and cause extinction. We destroy their habitats. And so we degrade it or we even fragment it. So if this is where, say, a population roams through this whole area and we build a road that runs right through the middle of it, we fragment that into two populations that those species have a harder time traveling between, and as a result we start to see problems in that world. And so habitat destruction, habitat degradation, habitat fragmentation is one of the biggest problems with extinction that humans cause. Next is invasive species. When we allow invasive species to come in, take over, compete for resources, then the ones that are native to that area are usually the ones that lose out. Next is population. Because we're growing the planet and we're using more and more resources and we need more and more space to do it, population of humans, human population growth is causing a lot of premature extinction. Next, we're polluting all over the place. Pollution causes extinction. Next, climate change. Shifting in the climate results in that. We talked about the golden toad, right? If you remember the golden toad, they believe is the first creature to become extinct because of climate change. And then overexploitation, using more than we should use of all the resources on the planet. So if you remember HIPCO, habitat, invasive species, population, pollution, climate change, and overexploitation are the things that are resulting in this problem for us. So when it comes to HIPCO, I just told you that habitat loss is the greatest threat. And so that breaks down into these main categories: deforestation, degradation of coral reefs, which is a huge one that a lot of people don't think about in Wyoming because we're not near coral reefs. Draining wetlands, which has been a big problem in, say, Florida and some other locations. We're losing wetlands way too fast, and plowing in grasslands have all resulted in a variety of different types of extinction. And then habitat fragmentation I just talked about in the first part for you. And so here's some examples of some HIPCO habitat degradation that's resulted in problems around the world. Black rhino right up here used to roam across all of the purple area, and now it only does it within the pink area. And so you can see it's greatly reduced its habitat. Asian and Indian elephant, another example. African elephant, another example. And the Indian tiger are all examples of creatures that are in real bad ways when it comes to extinction possibilities, premature extinction as a result of habitat. Endemic species. Endemic species are species that live here and have always lived here. And so, for instance, we got all these lemurs over here that only come from Madagascar, this little island right here. They belong there and only there. This lizard on the Galapagos Islands, Galapagos iguanas, they only live on that particular island. So they're endemic to that particular place. And as a result, they only live there, and so habitat destruction can really cause problems for those endemic species. Invasive species is next. This picture on the right shows you kudzu vine, which they brought in the United States to stop erosion a long time ago, back in the 30s. But the problem is it's not from around here, and as a result, there's not a lot of things around here that are slowed down, consuming anything like that. So this picture of kudzu vine is actually over top of a house. There's an entire house right here. So kudzu vine is a real problem, especially in the south of the United States. Non-native species in general typically don't have predators in places, competition in places, or pathogens and diseases that could destroy them, and as a result they can take over and kind of overwhelm an entire place. They do have benefits. Sometimes we use them for food, medicine, or aesthetics, but when we do that, we potentially set ourselves up for other issues. These are all examples of invasive species that now are very common here in the United States that you might know about and may not know about. Onward and upward. These are more invasive species. Again, things that aren't naturally from here that have created problems in other locations. Zebra mussels, I typically give you an article to read on zebra mussels for an example, but I think somebody's doing it for a poster, so I'm going to hold off on that. Characteristics of invader species. These are some of the things that show you the type of characteristics or problems that they do. They usually reproduce at really high rates. They're usually a pioneer species, which means they're hardy and set down roots for all. They can live for a really long time. They can disperse themselves. They can eat off anything under the sun, and they have a lot of genetic diversity. Species that are like that, like the kudzu vine, really create problems when they move into new locations. What type of ecosystems are vulnerable to that? The climate's similar to the habitat they came from, of course. An absence of predators. There's not enough stuff around that could create problems for them. Early successional systems. We're early on. We don't have really developed forests, things like that. So we plowed up grassland or whatever. That's a vulnerable location. Not a lot of biodiversity within the endemic population. Absence of fire. And then disturbed by human activity. We've messed up something with human activity, make it weak, and then they come in and attack. Population growth. This is an interesting chart. I always find it intriguing. This bottom line shows the population of the human race as it's grown over the last several thousand years, and this shows how many species have been on the planet during that time. And you're seeing the correlation over time of the fact that one goes up, the other one goes down, and so that's a scary thing. Pollution, of course, we pollute all three of these areas, water, air, and soil, and as a result, we create all kinds of problems for organisms that live there. Other forms of pollution thing that we have to be controlled about is bioaccumulation, biomagnification, which I've brought up in this class in the past, and they're important terms. DDT was an example I used. Remember that it built up in the bird population. I talked about the bald eagles and how they couldn't lay eggs as a result of it, but it actually started as fertilizer that then was absorbed in the water system and worked its way up. When it builds up over time to greater and greater quantities, higher and higher trophic levels, that's biomagnification. Bioaccumulation means it just sticks in the organism's tissue and doesn't leave. So it accumulates, bioaccumulation, and then as you move up trophic levels, it becomes more magnified. Climate change. This is an interesting one, and it's one that's, of course, up for debate constantly, but scientists accept this is very, very likely to be the cause of many future extinctions. Up to 25% they've estimated of plants and animals that could be lost by 2100 if we don't make some shifts in how we're doing business. Examples that are on that verge are polar bears, because they would have a range to exist in, and all the penguins that live in South America basically are Antarctica. Okay. HIPCO, this is overexploitation. It's the last one of the pieces of the puzzle. And so, for instance, humans taking more, killing more than they should have would be an example of overexploitation. And so, black market trading of wild animals is a very common thing, and that creates lots of problems. They say for every pet that you get in the pet store, an exotic pet, snake, bird, whatever, for every one that you got out, roughly 50 of them died in the movement to get that one into the pet store. And so you can think for every one that's out there in a pet store, how many perished on that process. That's threatening a lot of things, especially the rarer they are, the more people want them, the greater the problem as a result of that. Well, that 1 to 50 ratio is because of the amount of illegal trading of wild stuff that's out there. It's a very common practice. In addition, if you're really poor, you don't care that a lion or a tiger is a really rare thing. You got to feed your family, so you hunt for food, and that creates its own secondary problem. More people eating bush meat is what they call it, and as a result, we have those issues coming along those lines as well. And so poaching fits into that category of exploitation, and poaching happens usually for not the whole animal, but just for parts. So here's a rhino that they killed, extremely rare creature, not very common. As a result, can fetch a pretty penny, and just has had its horns cut off. That's it. The rest of the animal just wasted just for those, because somebody will pay a lot of money to get that for holistic cures and all kinds of stuff. Here's tusks from elephants. Most of the time, the elephant, thousands of pounds of meat goes to waste because the poachers come in and shoot that, cut those off, and take off. And then tiger pelts, tiger pelt, cheetah pelt, right? very, very expensive, rare things that fetch a lot of money. So all examples of exploitation. So remember, HIPCO, HIPCO, that's the key. See you later.